All right, as this article out of Zero Hedge says, BIS warns slowdown is worsening and spreading as central banks run out of ammo, and there's no doubt we are facing a very, very incredible time, one that the likes of which we've never seen before. Because remember, the 2008 recession never ended; it was just pushed off longer than it should have been in the first place, with vast centralization, central planning, the usual suspects involved. And we are entering into a bear market in the dollar as crypto and gold see rallies. We're not sure how long that will last, depending on manipulation tactics as per usual. But let's look into this article. As it says, every 6 months or so, the Bank of International Settlements, also known as the central bank's central bank, publishes some dire warning about the increasingly precarious state of the global financial system, largely as a result of an unprecedented monetary experiment that is now pushing on a string. And every 6 months or so, the world's most important central bankers congregate on 18th floor of the circular BIS tower in Basel, where they decide to ignore all the warnings and double down on policies that haven't worked in a decade, with the expectation that they will work this time, or at least make the world's richest even richer while destroying the middle class. And the middle class has been completely destroyed, mostly by inflation, but we'll get into that in a moment. As it continues, it says, well, today is one of those days, because at midnight on June 30th, the BIS published its annual economic report for the year 2019, and of course, this report, too, and the speech delivered alongside the annual general meeting in Basel by Augustin Carstens will be summarily ignored by those who matter until the next financial crisis strikes, and everyone is shocked how there were no signals indicating the arrival of what will soon be the greatest financial catastrophe in world history. You know, us here at World Alternative Media have been warning about this for a long time, and as per usual, called crazy. But anyway, continuing on, it says, of course, the BIS won't make any such dire predictions. The last thing it needs is to be accused of sowing the panic that unleashes a crisis. It will, however, warn that after a failed attempt by central banks to renormalize monetary policy, governments must step in to stimulate their economies and fix policies imbalances that have forced central banks to use up most of their firepower. The continuation of easy monetary conditions can support the economy, but make normalization more difficult, in particular through the impact on debt and the financial system, the BIS warned. And you see this chart here, monetary policy eases around year-end amid subdued inflation in percent. And of course, I'm sure all of you get this chart. This is where we need John Snyson to come in, because what? But I get inflation and the forward rates in China. It makes sense. It's always a mouthful to look at these charts. It's hard to show the average person this chart and be like, this is what's happening. Most people will be like, oh, I'm running away. I don't like this. I have no idea what this means, and I don't want to learn. But anyway, we'll fix that as much as we can with as much simplified information as possible. Anyway, going on here, it says, as a result of central banks going all in again in what some have dubbed the last rate to the bottom, the narrow normalization path has become narrower. If that wasn't enough, in his speech, Carstens explicitly brought attention to this critical issue, and I quote, while the near-term outlook is still good, there are many vulnerabilities further out. For the global economy to remain on course towards clear skies, other policies need to play a bigger role, and policymakers must take a longer-term perspective. In particular, a better mix is required between monetary policy, fiscal policy, macroprudential measures, and structural reforms. And navigating the way to clear skies also means balancing speed with the stability, as well as conserving some fuel to cope with possible headwinds. This matters all the more given the many uncertainties and risks we face today. The above excerpt comes from the speech by BIS General Manager Augustin Carstens, who urged politicians to ignite all engines to overcome a global soft patch, which can no longer be punted on central banks in hopes that lower rates will stimulate the global economy, for one simple reason. With rates at all-time lows, there is virtually nothing left to cut. Worse rates are now so low that at least the BIS admits banks are now suffering as a result of monetary policy. And as it continues here, it says price stability, central bank's key mandate, naturally reinforces a case for maintaining policy accommodation or easing further as inflation is below target. Closely related is the need to bring inflation expectations back towards target. This approach is even more compelling if financial markets look fragile, as they appeared late last year and could impact the economy adversely. The greater the uncertainty about conditions in the financial system and the macro economy, the stronger the case for a more gradual strategy. At the same time, the gains from such a strategy could be associated with costs and less room for policy maneuver in the future. The possible costs arise mainly through financial channels. The historically low for long interest rates tend to compress banks' margins, lower profits, and hence reduce banks' ability to build up capital, essential for a productive economy. And here is the timestamp for you, warning, so that the next time banks complain that nobody can or could have possibly seen the catastrophe coming, one can counter that their very superior warned them and again of what was coming. Very easy, it says, very easy financial conditions may boost growth in the near term, but may further build up vulnerabilities, and persistently low rates may undermine efficient resource allocation and productivity. And as per usual, they are trying to give options or ideas of more centralization, more control of the markets, more control of the monetary system, more of the same things that led to the same problems in the first place. All fiat currencies eventually revert to their true value of zero, going back to 1024 AD in China. They always have, they always will, and this time won't be any different. We are seeing the dollar go into a bear market, though it was probably one of the best assets to hold in the year 2018 as stocks fell and crypto fell and other things kind of made the same. But nonetheless, that's, you can invest in terrible things all the time and potentially make money off of them. But the dollar seems to be going into a bear market. We are seeing the yield curve inversion. And of course, we saw in Canada the 10-year and the 1 month. In the United States, the 10-year and the 3 month. And it's absolutely ridiculous. Also, the gold-silver ratio, which points to coming recessions and depressions. A recent interview with Robert Kiyosaki, of course, the financial guru himself of the Rich Dad Poor Dad fame, said recently in an interview with us that he believes we're in a depression, not as much a recession. Now, Lior Gantz from Wealth Research Group, who we also recently interviewed, says he won't put a label on it, but we're clearly seeing upward trajectory at 6-year highs, by the way, for something like gold, and a clear path towards cryptocurrency, where we are watching a potential huge parabolic rise. We've already seen some, but a parabolic rise going into the future, into a new bull market. Now, again, these are our opinions, not investment advice. Never take it as investment advice. Of course, things like gold and silver are wealth insurance, help you protect your purchasing power. But nonetheless, one thing they mentioned there with interest rates is very interesting, because you consider the fact that, well, we've been talking at WAM for years about how they're going to desperately try and pull up interest rates at the last moment. Of course, they are in a panic with incredibly low interest rates right now, and now they're talking about lowering interest rates, as we've seen recently in Australia, which causes a domino effect. We've seen them before in Japan and Sweden as well, but Australia being a major player, and the United States looking to do the same thing at the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell talking about it. We saw those considerations met with these bull markets in gold and crypto, at least appearing that way. There's no saying what level of manipulation they're capable of. But we are looking at negative interest rates in the future, likely at the rate of the past. I mean, at a more minimal scale. You look at the 2008 to 2012, and the interest rates were lower at about 5.5%. So you take that metric from today, and we're looking at around negative 2.5 to negative 3% interest rates, which is crazy, and something that people like Ron Paul has been warning about since the early 2000s. Something that was eventually going to happen, a negative interest rate policy. And that's usually followed by a centrally planned cashless system worldwide, on average. I mean, that's something that we see quite often. But nonetheless, We see something like that happen, and that's just at a minimal scale. We take it up a few notches, which we're expecting this to be a global catastrophe, the likes of which we've never seen before, and it'll be a much bigger issue at hand, much lower negative interest rates, and it's just so... the fact that we've gotten to this point, and people have called me crazy for years for talking about this. I was talking about it in 2006 going into the recession, and I was like 12 years old at the time, and people said, oh, well, why would I listen to you? And I don't really blame them, but nonetheless, this isn't new to me, and this isn't new to us at WHAM. We've been warning about this for a long time, and we've been right for a long time. There's just, the fundamentals are off the table, and they've just been pushing this off and off and off, and the more they push it off, the worse it'll be, the worse it'll come down on all of us. Now, I do want to bring in a few other articles quickly here in this report, like this one that says, stocks enter the sell zone, and there's talk about, as it says, it is my assertion, according to this guy from this, I think his name is Sven Henrik from the northmantrader.com. He says, it is my assertion that investors and traders are confronted with a similar situation as the S&P 500 is approaching its own version of the death zone, the sell zone, in the vicinity of the 3,000 level. And obviously, we are finally seeing a lot of big names come out and say, look, we are probably entering into a terrible bear market. And, you know, they finally admit it at the last second. They don't want to turn out like Bernanke in 2007 saying, all is good, don't worry, we need to buy. Or, you know, people, I think it was from the investment group BlackRock, I believe, who, Larry Fink, that was his name. Larry Fink recently said early last year to buy into the stock market, and then it crashed like a rock. And these people, you think they know what they're talking about? They really don't most of the time. They're actually really stupid, and then some of them are just evil. And then some of them, you know, actually are pretty smart. They just have evil plans for everyone else. Like, I think in a lot of ways, Warren Buffett, you know, hiding his money in charities, when really the whole thing is he's telling everyone else they should be extorted while hiding his own money. It's shady. I also want to mention here, you can see all the charts on the screen. I'm not going to go over everyone. It says it's an admission of a bankrupt system, a system that cannot do without artificial stimulus and cheap money, of course, and vast inflation and all those things that carry into other issues of government, where the government comes in and says we need to help. Well, no, the government isn't going to help you from the fact that they're creating this situation in the first place through legal tender laws, and with the banks, the fractional reserve lending, vast amounts of debt, inflation going up, wages look bad because the inflation is going up. So, you know, there's a lot of misunderstanding of where this all comes from. Anyway, carrying on, I do want to mention that the banks are mostly bankrupt. You look at their cash deposit ratio on their balance sheets, and many of them are looking at about 1% or under. Deutsche Bank is falling. Their derivative exposure is somewhere around $45 trillion. Ridiculous. It's over the point of being bailed out. I think Germany's economy is $3.5 trillion on average. I went to Deutsche Bank recently and trolled them at their headquarters in Frankfurt. And I think it's incredibly important to call these guys out where you see them and then dodge them when they jump out their window. So always be careful of falling bankers. Anyway, I'm rambling. My point is we are entering into a market and a monetary system the likes of which we've never seen before. And it's incredibly crucially important that all of us, every single one of us, looks to ways to ensure our wealth from the coming collision course that we're on. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. This is involving a lot more than just a monetary system, but it's carrying over to the housing market, something we've worried about for a long time. 74% of U.S. housing market unaffordable for average American, and that plays into foreign investment, that plays into vast inflation, that plays into housing manipulation, where we see in places like, all over the United States now. I shouldn't just name certain places. It's everywhere. It's not just hyper-localized, but collateralized debt obligations, mortgage-backed securities, credit default swaps, where you see in a lot of cases the return of these subprime lending, where we see massive amounts of people lining up for this. It's the same old thing, loan after loan, and then loans for the loans after loans. You know, it carries on. over and over and over again, and people just never learn from it. So we need to start looking at these problems on a global basis, understanding this is just basic economics. This isn't, rocket science. It's very simple, really, but people are resistant to learn about money because it's boring. It's considered boring, and they just don't want to have to deal with it because it seems like it's more complicated than it is, but it's actually quite simple. It's just made complicated on purpose so people run away and don't listen and cover their ears, eyes, and mouths so they, don't have to learn about one of the most important topics that anyone can learn about, which is money. Because if you don't understand money, your money has control over you, and therefore the people controlling the money have control over you. If you do understand money, you can have control over your money, which means that the people controlling the money cannot control you, and therefore you rule yourself. It's very important. It's one of the most important parts of self-determination and self-responsibility and self-ownership and control. Responsibility being the hallmark of freedom itself. So never forget that, folks. You must do everything in your power to try and understand these topics so that you can get ahead of the rat race and ensure that you can provide for your family going forward, and you don't end up in an impoverished situation like so many Americans and elsewhere. I mean, poverty rates are skyrocketing everywhere. It's terrible. They hide employment in the labor force participation rate. So when you see employment numbers going up, think again. Anyway, I do want to give solutions because there's more solutions to these problems than there are problems. And it comes down to, again, self-responsibility, financial stability, and also going into what I always say: food, water, shelter, self-defense. So you're not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block. Gold and silver as wealth insurance, not investment advice, like I said earlier, but wealth insurance, way, just being able to insure your wealth against these crises that happen over and over again. And then, of course, cryptocurrencies that are properly decentralized and fundamentally useful. There's scarcity, application use, and demand for them, which means not many of them, but the few that are in that category, you have to do your own due diligence. There are incredible marvels in that world that can help you in this kind of situation, decentralizing and breaking free from government, as well as blockchain infrastructure technology that's truly decentralized and not controlled by a centralized entity. So anyway, that's very important, and also privacy coins and all that kind of stuff. But going forward, this is going to come down to you, and no one's going to save you from yourself. No one's going to save you from the problems created by government in the first place. You do not want their help. Trust me. They're predatory, and they're looking to extort you in any way they can, and lead you to the slaughter as a slave, willing to do anything to ensure your own ability to survive in the coming rat race in front of us, the coming hurricane, the coming storm. If they shove you down a bottomless pit of debt, you are forced to ask for a ladder up from the government and the banking system, pushing you into perfect servitude to them right where they want you. So don't allow yourself to be pushed down that pit, and make sure that you do everything to protect yourself. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone, and until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Like what you see here at WAM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we're so heavily demonetized and censored and shadow banned. It's getting really bad, folks. If everyone just gave $1 single a month to, say, Patreon or our Subscribestar, where we do subscriber-only content, we could really get out of this rut that we are currently in as YouTube tries to stifle independent media and prop up the mainstream media. This is really important. This is one of the most important times in independent media history for us to say it's now or never. Let's keep moving forward, and let's be that change that we wish to see in the world. Of course, there's also our Bitcoin address below, as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And of course, we got events coming up, so make sure to check us out at anarchovegas.com. anarchovegas.com. Use promo code WAM, that's WAM, for a 10% discount on your tickets. It's on July 19th, 20th, and 21st in, of course, Las Vegas, Nevada. That's anarchovegas.com. Make sure to check us out there, and find us on websites like BitTube and Minds, and just try to support independent media, if not myself, any of the other big independent medias out there, to help us continuously bring our message to you free of charge, so that we can really change the guard as we move forward into a dramatically polarized, crazy future. Let's try to make it as sustainable as possible. It comes down to you guys. You are the change you wish to see. You guys will help us get through these tough times. So anyway, check out all those links, and until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.